Chapter 34. The lymphedema in Michelle's left arm kept getting worse, and so did the pain. I called every top-notch hospital in the country. Johns Hopkins, MD Anderson, Mayo. They all said the same thing. No cure for lymphedema, no effective treatment. No effective surgery either. And the treatments they offered were what we were already doing, and it wasn't working. In addition to the pain and swelling, there were a couple areas on Michelle's shoulder that were becoming red and hard, like there was a scar or scab forming underneath the skin. And she would sleep a lot during the day to handle the pain. And she began to frequently miss my phone calls from work. And I'd panic, and each time I'd drive the 20 minutes from work back to our house and check on her, and then I'd drive back. And I'd exhausted all my leave time by this point, and I was using FMLA, and even that was starting to run short. So with Michelle's permission, I bought one of those little webcams with an intercom feature and set it on the dresser in our bedroom so I could stop panicking if she missed my phone calls, because she would just be sleeping. And when she wouldn't answer, I'd open the camera's app and just watch her sleeping. Cry in my office with the door closed as I listened to her breathe. The red spots on her arm were getting worse, and wrapping the arm to help limit the lymphedema became more and more painful. One evening after I finished wrapping it, Michelle looked at me sadly and said, "Maybe I feel like I'm dying." We'd always been brutally honest with each other, but in the most gentle, loving way we knew how. So I looked at her and I replied, "I know it hurts like hell, but you're not dying, my love. I never ever lied to you. I'm your corner man, darling. My job is to support you and protect you. I'll throw in the towel myself and be the first one to tell you when it's hopeless and it's time to give up. But your last scans showed that your organs were still clear, baby. We can still beat this." And she nodded. And we held hands and prayed like always. This time I asked the Lord all my heart to strengthen us. And that is a prayer I rarely ever pray, for fear of what trial God's going to put me through to make me stronger. But this time we were already in the middle of the trial. So I knew it was the right prayer for us at the right time. We continued to pray that we'd find a new treatment, and not just for the lymphedema, but still for the cancer as well. Insurance had denied us over and over again for immunotherapy. Even after Dr. Taylor forced what's called a peer-to-peer review, which your doctor can do if you've been denied a request for treatment. And unexpectedly, one day we got a call from Genentech, which is the company that makes the immunotherapy drug that we were interested in. And they told us they were going to give it to us for free. Dr. Taylor's office had appealed to them directly, and all the efforts on our behalf had finally paid off. We thank Genentech and Dr. Taylor and his office, and we thank God for using them as a means to help us. And we asked him to bless every single person involved. And later on that day, while walking Taz, our dog, I found 11 four-leaf clovers. And if that sounds like a lot, I've always had a knack for finding them, but rarely so many so quickly. And I took it as a good sign. Before we could start the immunotherapy, we had to do a new set of scans to establish a baseline. And Michelle switched to PET scans, PET scans, instead of the CT scans to prevent the horrible allergic reactions to the contrast dye. It was on a sunny day in the middle of March 2019. We were scheduled 3 different doctor's visits in 3 different locations in 2 different cities. Now, it was supposed to only have been 2 visits in 2 cities, right? One in Lexington at the MRI center to get the PET scan, and the second one in Georgetown to see Dr. Taylor. But the MRI center couldn't start an IV on Michelle or access her port. So we'd have to go to another place first and do that and then come back. And after the failed attempts to start an IV or access Michelle's port, she was just distraught and ready to give up because, for one, she was an impossible stick. You know, you could not hit a vein on her without ultrasound. Out of all the doctors and nurses that I'd seen try it, and I'm talking about dozens, man, there were only 2. There were 2 that could do it without an ultrasound. And I'm talking about an IV, not a port. There were a few, especially at the infusion center, they could access a port. But sometimes it gave trouble too. But as far as starting an IV on her without an ultrasound, forget about it. Except for 2. And for some reason, they could always do it first try, every time. Just those 2. Nobody else could start an IV on Michelle. And I would not let them keep trying and trying, because some nurses would just keep sticking you. And I knew that they weren't going to be able to. If they didn't get it within, I gave them 3 tries. And if they didn't get it by 3 tries, I made them stop. And we'd just have to reschedule it, or we'd have to get an ultrasound machine or something, because I'd seen her stuck so many times, you know. It just, I wasn't going to let them do it. And most of them were pretty cool with it, but they understood. But, you know, sometimes I had to firmly enforce that with some nurses that probably thought I was an asshole, honestly. But I'm going to tell you what, my wife wasn't some damn pin cushioner. You're just going to stick over and over and over again because your ego won't let you admit that you can't start a line. It just wasn't happening. So if they couldn't get it by the 3rd try, they weren't going to get it. So the MRI center made us an appointment at a place with an ultrasound. And they shifted Michelle's PET scan for later in the afternoon, and I called Dr. Taylor's office to see if they could shift our appointment there too. And they could, so I encouraged Michelle to not give up. And despite there being several more hassles, which I won't even go into, but it was just one thing after another, we were finally able to complete all 3 appointments, just barely. Not on time for any of them, but we did it. And as we left Dr. Taylor's office, which was the final appointment of what had been a very long and hard day, we immediately noticed that our car had a flat tire. And Michelle and I just looked at each other, and our mouths were just hanging, like just open mouth look of astounded expression of just disbelief. And then we just started laughing. Both of us, like, hysterically, just started laughing. Couldn't believe it after the type of day we had to walk out in that car. The tire would just be flat like that. We just bust up laughing. We laughed so hard that we couldn't get air in our lungs, and we had to sit down on the curb for a minute. And I was trying to get Michelle to stop laughing, and so I could work on the tire. She's trying to get me to stop laughing so she could stop laughing. Oh man, having made all of our appointments for the day, we thought it was just absurdly hilarious. Just one final minor inconvenience to cap off a day filled with obstacles at every single turn. But I carry road tools and a spare in any vehicle I drive. And I always have a good jack too, you know, them little ones that come with the car. I always keep a pretty decent jack and a good tire tool, one of the ones that extend out that's got the sockets that you can flip around. It's got all 4 sizes. Always keep one of them because it works as a brake bar, and always keep a good jack and a spare, just road tools like that, plugs, things like that. I always keep that in my car. And I put the spare on, and we drove to a gas station and went to the air machine, filled it with air and plugged it, and had it back on the car in about 20 minutes. And as I repaired the tire, Michelle and I talked about everything, and we reflected over our day, and we really came to realize how blessed we were to get everything done despite all these hassles that we ran into. And it was at every turn we ran into hassles. God had somehow made the most difficult of days doable, even keeping air in our flat tire until we had time to fool with it. On the way home, we saw a young girl running playfully through the tall grass with her dog. And she had this great big smile on her face. It's carefree, completely carefree. And when she came to a dandelion in front of her, she kicked it playfully and purposefully into a little white cloud without breaking stride and laughing as she did it. And I couldn't help but smile, and I looked over at Michelle and I saw that she was smiling too. Despite everything we were going through, and despite Michelle being in a whole lot of pain from what had been a long, arduous day full of difficulties, that young girl's joy was so real and so powerful that she shared it with us and made it our joy without even knowing or trying. I'll never forget that.